I lived a very normal American life. I grew up on a small farm up in the mountains. We had cows and horses, and it was a family of boys. I had all brothers. So I grew up in a very rough and tumble lifestyle. You know, we worked hard, we played hard, and we had a lot of fun. My brothers and I were very close. I was the middle one. I had a younger brother and an older brother, but we were all within about 4 years, so we were very, very close. We did a lot of sports, a lot of football, things like that, so we were very active. And my mother was a devout Christian. She and my father had split up, but I grew up with that conservative Christian background. For me, there was always this stirring, I suppose, about what is real, you know, what is truth. And I remember as a boy going out into the fields, and it was dark. You would see the stars at night, you know, and I could look up at the stars. I went away to college, actually, to play American football. I had a scholarship to do that, but I also wanted to be an artist. So I was studying art and playing football on the other side. That's when I was 19, 20, 21. And while I was away to college, that's probably the most important thing that happened is I fell madly, head over heels in love. Met a young woman named Tamara, and gosh, my heart just knew. I mean, I didn't even know her name. She walked in the room, and it was like lightning hit me. It's like, there she is. And we became beautiful friends. I mean, we had a friendship, and it turned into a relationship, and it turned into a courtship, and then we were eventually married. Tamara was a school teacher. She taught high school, the upper levels, and I was a marketing person. I graduated and got my degree in marketing, and we were pursuing our careers, and we had our first child, little son. We called him Spencer. Oh, he was a joy. It was fun. We enjoyed raising our little boy, and Tamara said, let's have more children. But there had been complications. But 6 years after the fact came Griffin, a second child. So suddenly we had these 2 boys, beautiful family. But everything changed really with the near-death experience, and that was a result of a horrific automobile accident. And I'll never forget it. It's been 20 years now since the accident happened, but I can recall the details like it was yesterday. We were on a family vacation, actually. It was the Easter weekend. We had been away. We had been visiting Tamara's parents. We had had a beautiful Easter weekend, and Monday came. It was time for me to get back to work, so we loaded everyone in the car. And we'd been down in southern Utah in the Red Rock country, and we were driving up to North Utah where we live. And there's certain moments of that I'll never forget. It's almost like time stood still, especially in hindsight. I mean, we had put everyone in the car, and actually we were just getting ready to pull away. I had just put the car in drive, and Tamara reached over and said, oh, wait just a minute. I want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time. Which at the time I thought, gosh, we said goodbye. You know, let's get on the road. But I put the car in park, and I watched. She went up to the porch. She not only hugged her mother and father, but she also kissed them both. And then she came back to the car quite happy, got in, buckled in her seatbelt. We got on the interstate. I put the car on cruise control, went up to 75 miles per hour, which was as fast as I could legally go. I was hurrying, you know, to get back to work in the office, and it was a half-day drive. It was a 4 to 5 hour drive that we were making. And even during that process, I was racing down the road, and I was thinking about all the things I had to do at work and going on and on. Tamara had actually laid her seat back to have a nap. And I just peeked in the rearview mirror. I noticed Griffin, my youngest son, just barely learning to walk and talk. I saw this little boy, and I thought, what a miracle. We were told we may not have any more children, and there he is, you know, beautiful. And then I just glanced behind me where Spencer, who was 7 years old at the time, he was playing with little action figures and making all kinds of noise, and I thought, what a joyful little boy. And I then glanced at Tamara, who was sleeping but holding my hand, and I thought, wow, I'm so lucky. That's what I felt, is I had this moment of just absolute gratitude. I'm so lucky for what I have. But it was about an hour after that it got really, really bad. There was heavy winds. There was reports of a pickup truck that was driving erratically on the highway. The hardest part about the story and the experience is I believe I dozed off. I mean, we'd been driving long, and I think I maybe just nodded off at the wheel for a minute. But when I did that, the car swerved to the right. I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car, and then it began to roll. And it rolled not off the road, but down the road at 75 miles an hour on the concrete. It was a horrific automobile accident. The police reports say the car probably rolled 6 to 8 times. I blacked out for most of that. I don't recall actually rolling, but when the car came to a stop, I was incredibly conscious. I mean, like, oh my gosh, what happened? And the first thing I was aware of was Spencer, my 7-year-old, crying in the back seat, just crying hysterically. And as a father, I thought, okay, well, he's okay. I've got to get to my son. I've got to get to my boy. But that's when I realized that I could not move. I was pinned, and I couldn't tell if I was pinned to the seat or the floorboard. I was disoriented. I was struggling to breathe. There was excruciating pain. I had no idea of my injuries. What had actually happened is that both of my legs had been crushed and shattered. The left leg was actually amputated above the knee. My back had been injured, my rib cage was injured, and my lungs were collapsing. My right arm had almost been torn off. It was severed really badly, and all the muscles had been torn out of the socket. And then the seatbelt cut through my midsection and had ruptured my intestines, my insides. I had no idea. All I knew is that my son was crying. I wanted to get to him. And that's when the brutal reality hit that no one else was crying. That's when I thought, oh my gosh. And I knew Tamara is gone. I saw, which I don't talk a lot about, Tamara, because she had laid her seat back, was not restrained properly by the seatbelt, and so she had suffered some pretty severe head trauma in the accident, which took her life. Griffin, my little boy, the car seat had broken up, and he had been ejected from the car. And so I couldn't see him. But it's like I knew in my heart. It was the darkest, most awful feeling of they're gone. They're gone, and I knew that. And suddenly the guilt, the regret, I just kept thinking, can't I just take back that 5 seconds? What happened? How did I crash the car? It was absolute panic. And Spencer is crying hysterically. In fact, I was attempting to speak to him. I knew I was losing consciousness, but I said to Spencer, I said, it's going to be okay. And I thought, that's a lie. It's not okay. Half the family's gone. I'm losing consciousness. Nothing will ever be the same. But it was in that darkest moment, it was in that turmoil, that horror of the accident, that I felt, well, the best word is light. It's like light came. It's like I felt light come and circle around me. Almost like it was a blanket. Almost like it was comforting me in this horrific moment. And it felt as if I was rising above the scene of the accident. The best word is maybe like in this bubble of light. And I rose above the accident. Now I can breathe. The pain's gone. Am I okay? That's what I was asking is, am I okay? Suddenly I realized that Tamara, who I knew was gone at the scene, she was there with me and very much alive and gorgeous. That's, the only reason I share what happened to her in the accident, because all of a sudden she was there and there was no injuries, there was no head trauma. She was radiant and beautiful and glorious. She was upset and frantic. She's like, Jeff, you've got to go back. You've got to go back. You can't come. You can't be here. There I was looking at the woman I loved more than life. But I also knew I had a little boy crying in the back seat of that car. And I had to make a choice about coming back. It was so real. It wasn't like a dream at all. It's almost like my senses were multiplied. For instance, in this state, if I can see and smell and taste and hear and all those things, in that state, it was super sensory. It was so real that it makes this life feel like the foggy dream. It's like this feels like the weird, strange, dreamy state. That was reality. I looked at her and I thought, I've got to go back. I can't leave our little boy orphaned. I literally got to say goodbye, and I made the choice to come back. Now, I didn't have to figure out how do I go back. It was in the intention. It was in the intention of thinking, I'm going back. As I did so, I found myself wandering around a hospital. Now, I have no concept of time in this bubble of light. I mean, I don't know how many minutes or hours went by. I later found out that people arrived at the scene of the accident. One happened to be a doctor, which was able to do some emergency procedures, care for Spencer. They rushed us to a local hospital, and Spencer was not badly hurt, my 7-year-old. He was banged up a little bit, but he basically physically walked away from the accident, but emotionally, he thought the whole family was gone. With the extent of my injuries, there's no way that hospital could see to my care. They had to life flight me to a level 1 trauma center, which they did. They flew me to the nearest metropolitan city where I could get the care I needed. And I had no idea about any of that. All I knew is I had wrecked the car. I had said the most profound goodbye I would ever say. And there I was wandering around through a hospital, looking at the nurses and the doctors and the patients and the families of the patients. But the incredible thing is everybody I saw, I knew them. Like they were strangers, but I would look at them and I knew everything about them. I knew their love, their hate, their joy, their decisions, their pain, their motivations. I knew them as if they were me. It was intense things. I felt there was a nurse, and I knew that she had been abused as a child, physically, sexually, emotionally. And I thought, wow, I could feel it as if it had happened to me. But in feeling it, I had this profound compassion for her. It's like, oh, wow, look what she has overcome. Look what she endured. And then I had this intense feeling of, look who she is now because of that, this compassionate, medical staff, literally healing people. I had this intense connection to everyone. And there was this sense of love for everyone. And it didn't matter who they were or what they had done or what they hadn't done. And I saw them as this incredible soul. All those judgments from religion just went away. It was like, aren't they incredible? Aren't they beautiful? And I did have a verse like from the Bible come up as I'm wandering around the hospital. There's a famous verse attributed to Jesus that says, "Inasmuch as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me." Which I used to think was a really nice passage about being nice to people, which I suppose it is, but I was feeling it at such an intense level. I realized, wow, so what Jesus was saying is, I am them and they are me. And that's what I was experiencing. I was them and they were me. And there was this oneness, this connection that was undeniable. And I was the heroin addict. I was the nurse. I was all of it. I was everything, and everything was me. But it was all encircled to this intense love and this intense compassion, unconditional love. And I was just marveling at this experience until I came up to a man or a body laying on the gurney that I didn't feel anything from, which I thought was weird. And so I stepped closer and took a look, and that's when I realized, oh my goodness, that's me. But it wasn't me. I was having this incredible connected experience, but there was my body. There was, that skin suit that I'd been wearing around life. And it was incredibly sad because my body was a wreck. I've taken for granted that I'm healthy and can run and be athletic and feel good, and yet there was my body so broken. A couple of things were huge for me in that, and that is that I'm not my body. I was something far greater. And then also, I had peace, even in the trauma of everything that had happened, by being out of the situation. And I also realized, too, that dying, was very natural. It was very beautiful. Many might say that I suffered a very violent, traumatic death, in the car accident and all the injuries and everything that had happened, but I wasn't even aware of the injuries. But I also knew I've got to get back in. I've got to get back in that body and carry on. I've got to live for my son. And once again, there was no figuring it out. It was intention. I'm going back in, and then boom, I was back in the body. But when I went back into the body, the heaviness and the regret, the guilt, the pain, the trauma, all of that. So I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. And it was awful to be back in the body. I was ventilated. They had a big tube, down my throat doing the breathing since my lungs had collapsed. My legs were obviously immobile. My right arm was immobile. And then they had tied down my left arm because I kept grabbing at all the medical equipment. It was really intense. In fact, it was almost like I had one foot in this realm and one foot in that realm, because I would find myself leaving the body every now and then. I would feel like, gosh, I need a break, and there was times I felt like I was over in the corner watching it all, just taking a break from it all, knowing I've got to get back in the body again, and I would go in and out of the body. I also had, it was like continued communication with Tamara, my wife. I recall having a very intense conversation with her when I was out of the body again. And she was letting me know what she wanted done at the funeral services. And she wanted her sister-in-laws to have her fancy dresses. And she wanted her cousin and her niece to have those special rings and the jewelry. It was almost trivial things, but she was communicating to me. Probably the most profound thing that happened was at the end of my hospital stay. I was out of ICU, and I was in ICU for months, and then I would go to surgical recovery. I had horrible infections. I had pneumonia in my lungs. I kept throwing pulmonary embolisms. They're blood clots that lodge in your lungs. So I was very sick for a very long time. But by this case, I was out of ICU, out of surgical recovery. I was actually in the rehabilitation unit of the hospital. In fact, it was only weeks before I was to come home. I finally was able to roll and sleep on my side. And I remember falling asleep. And the guilt, the grief, the pain, the trauma, everything that I'd been dealing with. And while I was sleeping, I felt that light come again. Just like at the scene of the accident, suddenly I felt this blanket of light. And although I was joyful to be sleeping, the grief and the guilt, I'd lost half my family. I had lost half my body. I was worried about my son and how was he going to deal with this? How was I going to deal with it? So there was a constant worry, but I was peaceful in my sleep. And this light came and embraced me and was comforting me just like at the accident in those situations. And again, I felt a lift. And then the light seemed to dispense, like a fog or a mist that goes away. The light was gone. And I was in the most incredibly beautiful place. And it was so real. Once again, it was so sensory. That might seem odd that it felt physical, but I was running. I could feel the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the warmth and the energy from the ground beneath my feet. And I began to run, and it felt as if I was running. I could feel, the muscles in my calves and thighs, and I was joyfully running. It's odd, what was coming to my mind is, wow, it's good to be home. I was home. People say heaven or the other side. To me, I was home. It was so familiar. It was so welcoming. I was so joyful to be there. And when I say it felt like a physical experience, everything was super sensory. I could taste the colors. I could smell what I was seeing. And I was elated to be there. I got this message. It was like a knowledge, like a knowing that you're not here to stay. And I thought, oh, I just want to stay, And about the time I got that message, there was this corridor off to my left, and I knew intuitively I'm to go down there. And I made my way down the corridor, and as I did, I could see something at the end of the corridor, and so I made my way to the end of the corridor. And when I got there, it was a crib, much like the one Griffin had been sleeping in because he was still just a baby. I raced to the crib, and I looked in the crib, and there was Griffin. There was my little boy. And he was sleeping as peacefully and as beautifully as when I had peeked in the rearview mirror on the ride home. And I swept him up in my arms. Now, I had worried and had pain over that because I knew he'd been thrown from the car. And I didn't know what had happened, but I knew he had been killed. But there he was, perfect. And when I swept him up, and again, it was so physical what I could feel. I could feel the heat from his body, and I thought, he's okay. And I could feel him breathing. I could feel his rib cage expanding. I could feel his breath on my neck, and I thought, he's okay. He's just fine. And then I smelled his hair. You know, I smelled his hair and thought, it's my little boy. He's perfect. He's okay. And I could feel him solid against me. And I was even marveling then, if I'm out of the body, how does it feel so physical? But it did. I could feel and smell and taste and touch everything. And I began to weep, just thinking, oh, he's okay. And I was holding him, and I had longed for that over those months. And as I was holding him, I felt an intense messed up and lost control, and I began to think, my thought was, I hope I'm forgiven. I hope some way I can be forgiven for, did I take the life of my little boy? That was the guilt. It was very deep. And as I was weeping, holding him and feeling this presence come behind, and as I had that thought, suddenly this presence came so close, and this felt physical too. I felt these loving arms wrap around and hold us. And the message just came as powerful as could be. There's nothing to forgive. Everything is in pure divine order. Everything is okay. And it was almost like there was just this download of truth and knowledge and love and peace and all those misconceptions I had about God, that I was being tested, that I was probably failing, that I was going to be judged. Those were swept away in pure, unconditional love. There are not even words for the love that I felt. As I was wrapped in those arms, and it was almost like me and my little boy became part of that, like we became God. And suddenly I was seeing everything differently. In fact, I saw my life. I saw my parents get divorced and the insecurities that created in me, and I saw the relationship with my brothers and the things that had happened. And I saw things that I thought, well, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. But in those loving arms, it was just flowing, there are no mistakes. Everything's in perfect order. And I saw things that I knew they were wrong, but I did them anyway. And I was thinking, oh, don't, and there was so much love. All that was flowing through me is, look how much we love you. Look how much we honor your choices. Look how much we honor your life. And I was being told, I say told, it wasn't with words, it was just with this pure energy that everything was perfect. Even that my life was perfect. That everything happened for a reason, that I was learning in every instance, and that actually that I was perfect. And that would blow my mind. I thought, well, how could I be perfect? But there was also this oneness in that. If I was perfect, then everyone else was perfect too, and everything was in divine order. And I also felt as if I was divine. Like I say, it's almost like we became God. I felt like I'm a divine soul. I'm a divine being of light, having this crazy life experience that my soul might expand, and yet none of it is real. This is real. That's just the stage of a play or something I'm going through. It's an experience I'm having. And also I learned about choice again. I was told that I could be angry at God my whole life and think that he took my family away, or that, somehow life was not fair. And that was okay. There was no judgment whatsoever. I could do that. But the beautiful thing is I was given another choice, and it was that I could exercise my will. I could give Griffin, I could give my son back to God, back to the universe, and then my will would be part of it, that I could make a choice in that, and I could literally let go. In all that love and in all that peace and in all that beauty, I was able to kiss my little boy and give him back. And then I woke up, back in the hospital bed, back to the amputation, the injuries, all that had happened. But I had a little bit different perspective, realizing everything's a choice and realizing that everything is in divine order. and that if I'm perfect, then everyone's perfect. There's no need to judge anyone for anything, and that life's actually perfect, if I could literally reach out and embrace it that way. So I think it's interesting that these two things happened when I was not on heavy narcotics. And they're so real. I mean, it's been 20 years, but I can remember them like they were yesterday. I can't remember what happened in the hospital. I don't remember when I moved from ICU to... All of that is foggy, but the spiritual things that happened, the out-of-body things that happened were like they were yesterday. I'll never forget them. And it changed me. Now, I don't want any misconceptions. It was difficult. I mean, it wasn't like I wrecked the car, I had these incredible experiences, and then I was okay. I was a wreck for almost 10 years. I mean, I was grieving, I was hurt, I missed my family, I missed my leg, I missed all of it. Spencer, my little 7-year-old, how difficult for him. He lost everything I did. He didn't lose his leg, but he lost his mother, he lost his brother, he in many ways lost his father. Coming home to him was very difficult, because I thought, how am I going to do this? I mean, well, first of all, I was in a wheelchair, and this leg was chopped off. My right leg was still in a big brace, you know, holding it out straight so it would heal. My right arm was in a sling, and I had a little electric wheelchair that I could drive with my one good hand. And that's how I returned home. Now I was going out into the world. We were going to have to go to the market and to school, and, you know, I was really worried about him. The day I came home was interesting, and I share this for a specific reason. My brothers, who were incredible. I mean, I can't imagine what I would have done without family and friends in this situation, but my brothers they almost lost their jobs to be at the hospital with me, to see me through. They came to get me when it was time to go home. They'd have to lift me into the wheelchair and put me and lift me into the car, and they drove me home, and there was a ramp that had been installed so I could get in the front door. And I saw Spencer, my 7-year-old, watching out the window as my brothers, his uncles, you know, were lifting me out of the car and putting me in the wheelchair, and I thought, how's he going to deal with this? And then he did run, and he finally threw himself on my lap, which just about killed me because I still had all the sutures down from when they put my insides together. And he threw his arms around me, and I had a huge epiphany. I realized that sitting in a wheelchair and holding my surviving son in this realm was no less divine than being in the other realm and holding my son who had passed there. I mean, suddenly heaven, if you will, was right here. I mean, there was nowhere to go, there was nothing to be. There's these divine moments, and it's never gone away. I mean, for 20 years now, and yeah, I had to get back to work, I had to make a life, and we did. But there's those little moments in life that are they're divine. It's like something opens up and your heart gets it. I had miracles happen. I mean, I say I had angels show up. And sometimes those angels were my brothers or my mom. Sometimes it was neighbors. But I felt as if there was always angels from the other side. It's almost like Griffin and Tamara never really were gone. I eventually fell in love again, which was crazy. I mean, it was. I had guilt about that. I think I have a guilt complex. I mean, I had this incredible woman come into my life, Tanya. She's my wife now. And I wasn't dating. I was still bereaved. I was still heartbroken. But I began to have feelings for her. And I felt awful. I would go to the graveyard, and I would lay on my wife's grave, and I was sobbing, saying, well, I was angry. At one point, I'm like, how could you leave me like this? You know, I don't even walk right. And I'm trying to raise our son, and you're in that beautiful place, and how dare you leave me? I mean, I was angry. And it was interesting because as I was pouring out my heart and letting her have it with my words, I felt her. Now, I don't see, but I felt her. I felt as if she came and put her hands on my shoulders behind me. And then she communicated so clearly. She was like, don't berate me for leaving. And she said to me, she said, I loved you enough to leave. And I thought, wow, but that can't be right. That can't, that doesn't make sense. And she communicated, she said, you would not be learning what you're learning life would be so different. I would have loved nothing more than to grow old with you and be with you, but that was not the plan. And she laid out like this was a big plan. We made this deal that you were going to come, you were going to have this experience, and that I was going to love you enough to go so that you would have those feelings and have your soul expand in such a way. And none of this really made sense. And so I don't fight fair. And I said, yeah, but I'm having feelings for another woman, you know. And she laughed at me. She said, of course you are. Of course you are. I want you to be happy. I want you to have love. I want you to be with someone. I am not jealous. I'm not upset. I'm not hurt. In fact, she communicated, I sent her your way. You can do whatever you want. You have the choice. But she will teach you unconditional love. And it was so real. Once again, that was so real to me. I could hear the voice in my head, but I could feel it in my heart. I mean, the communication was so clear, and I could feel her there. Even though I didn't feel her physically, I could feel her right there with me. And that was life-changing as well. And I eventually remarried, you know. I mean, Tanya and I continued our relationship, and Spencer embraced her as a mother. Tanya's the hero of the story. I mean, she came in and continued to heal a broken man, because I was broken. And she took Spencer on as her son and kind of put all the pieces back together for us. And then we adopted 2 boys. Tanya was not able to have children, and she said, I think we should adopt. And I don't even say adopted boys. I just call them my sons. We adopted 2 boys that are brothers, and they came as a package, you know, deal to our home. But I just say my sons made it to our house. It looked a little different. We rebuilt this family, but it was still hard. You know, it wasn't, I mean, it took me 10 years to really get over the grief, to really embrace love. And I think the key for me too is, even though I had had those profound experiences, I was still looking for joy and peace out there somewhere. Who can bring this to me? Tanya, if she could just love me enough to make me feel okay, or if the boys could just love me enough to make me feel okay, or in my job, or whatever else I was grasping at to feel like I was wanted and I was loved and I was okay. Even though I had been in the arms of God and felt perfect, but I was still looking for it for an outside source. In fact, I was wandering around thinking, where's all that love I felt here? Where will I ever find it? And the key was when I finally looked within myself instead of looking out there. When I finally realized, oh, to love unconditionally, I get to love myself unconditionally. And when that happened, the healing began, because I was never going to find it out there. It had to be felt within. And even in my Christian upbringing, this Jesus fellow said, the kingdom of God is within you. Don't look out there for it. And I began to maybe grasp what that meant a little more, that it is within us. We are divine beings. We do have the power to create our own situations if we embrace ourselves that way and do so. For many years, I didn't talk about my experience at all. I didn't want people to think I was crazy. And also, I felt it was just for me. It's like, this is sacred stuff. You don't, it's not lunchtime conversation to say, hey, by the way, I went to the other side and saw God, And so I just held it to my own self. I didn't share about it. I didn't talk about it. Very few people even knew that I had had an experience. But I was talking to a group of people, and it was a Sunday school class. I was teaching a class. And the subject was the love of God. And I began to get emotional, saying, oh, I have felt the love of God. I couldn't hold back the emotions because I was thinking of being in those arms. And there was a woman in the back that came up, and I knew her. She was a neighbor of ours, and she said, there's a lot more to your experience you don't talk about, right? And I said, yeah, but I don't talk about it. And she said, I think you should meet with a person I know. And it was a man at the university who studied near-death or out-of-body experiences. And I said, oh, no, I don't. And she said, please do this. So I sat down with him and shared what had happened. Of course, I'm just weeping. I hadn't talked of it much, and he was crying too. And when I finished, there was someone in the back that was with a publishing company and came up and said, "You've got to write a book." And I said, "No, I don't even talk about this, let alone write a book." And there was so many things falling into place, and there was this little whisper, I call it a whisper, that was saying, maybe that's why you're still here. And so it's really not about me, it's about healing. And if I can do something that makes a difference in the world with the catastrophe that happened, then that makes it worth it. Then that makes it in some ways okay, or at least a little bit better. I mean, there's so much division in the world. Everything teaches us that we're separate. You're of that political party, I'm of this one. You're a woman and I'm a man, or you're gay and I'm straight, or you're black and I'm white, there's all this segregation, all this division. The one thing that was so profound in my experience was the oneness, realizing that we are connected, that I am you and you are me, and that we're really here together. We're all in this together. There's no stepchildren in this family of God. And also the love I felt. I have embraced that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love can heal everything, and it can heal anything if we can simply come together. And in many ways, too, I embrace that as well. I used to live in a fear that the world was going to end or God was going to come and fix it. Now I'm a firm believer that it's up to us, that we're divine, powerful beings. And that if we can embrace that love that is within each of us by loving ourselves and then loving others, that's the ripple effect. That's what creates heaven right here. There's nowhere to go or anything to be. It's to really embrace and love each other here, and suddenly that beautiful place becomes the ground under our own feet. The oneness, the connection that we have. And it doesn't matter who said it. There's been many masters, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad, I don't care which one. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, it doesn't matter. The homeless guy on the street, we are all masters. You will never encounter someone that's not a magnificent, glorious, divine being. There's this whole great big universe. Universe. I love that because una means one and verse means song. There's this one big song. And each and every one of us have a part to play in that, a part to sing. And I sing at a tone that's far different than yours. And every tone comes together in the perfect melody, the perfect harmony. And it's already happening. We don't see it because we see ourselves as separate, but if we realized and stepped into the oneness that we already are and sang our song so brightly and shined as we do, it's like the stars. Everyone has a different twinkle, but when you look at that Milky Way and that galaxy, you say, wow, look how beautiful it is collectively. Look how beautiful the stars are individually. And that's how we are. We're already that. There's nothing to become. If it's so good there, why be here? I deal with a lot of people who struggle with suicide or who have lost children to suicide, and I have no judgment of that. There were many times during my struggles that I thought I'd rather just go. Of course, I had a son here that was keeping me pretty grounded. But I think this is the big game. It's like we can't experience what we want to experience when everything's light and beauty and peace. It's almost like we wanted to have the opposite. We wanted to experience what we're not so we could finally embrace what we truly are. I'll go back to my old football days where they would draw it on the chalkboard and all the X's and O's and everything looked perfect, and yet you never knew until you got on the field and smelled the grass and had someone hit into you and that, what it was like. And I believe life is like that. We wanted to come and have the experience because our soul would expand. And while we're here, we just think, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is too hard. But our higher self, our higher knowledge thinks, yeah, but that's why you came. It's easy for me to sit in a beautiful house and say life is good. And there's people that suffer, struggling. I'm working with some folks that work with human trafficking. Kids being taken and put into the sex trade or whatever else. There are things in the world that are heart-wrenching. And so how do we look at those and say it's all in divine order? How does this make sense? I embrace it as a perfect opportunity to be love. How can I shine light in dark places? How can I embrace things and make a difference? And I realize I'm just one. I'm just one guy, but gosh, can I make life better for somebody today? Can I do something for someone? And by doing it for the one, you're doing it for the all. Even when I raise my own vibration, if I can go meditate for a minute and get at peace or forgive, something, even if it's forgiving myself, I forgive others very easily. The hard one to forgive for me is myself. That ripples out. It ripples out and affects the consciousness of all of humanity, but it comes down to choice. We live in fear. We're so conditioned with judgment or religion or even our parents or whoever said, well, you're a bad boy, you don't deserve that, that's not coming. Well, you've got to earn that, all these things that we have conditioned in our mind when in reality we are deserving. We are worthy, always. We're of great worth. And the earth is so beautiful. Now, after having the experiences I had, I used to wonder about miracles, gosh, how do you create a miracle? And yet now, I can go out and watch a sunrise, and it's an absolute miracle. Like heaven's right here. I see the flowers grow. That's a miracle. Smell the fresh air, feel the rain on your skin, and think, wow, it's so incredible to be in this realm and to be alive, and there is no death, and I'm having this experience, and there is no judgment. I'm going to move from this, and I'll tell you, when we pass from this life, we're going to be embraced by loving arms and simply asked, what did you learn? Tell me about what you learned in your experience. What was it like to be like that? What was it like to be you? What was it like to have this or not have that? And it's all going to be a collective oneness of, wow, look what we learned. Look what we created. Look at the uniqueness. And we'll realize we always were one. We always were connected. It was just our inability to embrace it and realize it that held us back. It's difficult because so much of our society just struggles day to day. It's hand to mouth. How do I survive? How do I make enough money to pay the rent and to put groceries on the table? There's no time or energy for how do I assist others? How do I make a difference in the world? I've found a key for me, and it's if I can take only 10 minutes a day. I would rather take an hour, but even 10 minutes to be still and just reconnect. Always be connected. Just remember that connection. Remember who I am. Remember that everything's in divine order, and let go of the fear. Let go of the contention. Let go of that doubt that there's not enough. We live in such fear that there's not enough. There's not enough money. There's not enough food. There's not enough time. There's not enough love. And yet if we can let go of that and realize there is enough. And I think the key for me was realizing that I'm enough. I'm enough. I limp around on one leg and I do the best I can, but I am enough by simply being me, by simply showing up in light, in love, and loving the people around me and taking care of those around me. And when I say taking care of, just energetically, I will probably never make enough money. I'll probably never have. But then again, what's money? It's just energy. I've had lots of money and I've had nothing. And it didn't make me any happier one way or the other. There's always that, well, I want more money, or I need to make more this, or if I only had more money, I could get that. They're just things. They're just things. I remember sleeping in the backseat of my car at one point when I was young. And I had nothing, but I didn't need anything. I was fine. Money's not who I am, and none of it is who I am. If I really get in touch with, I'm not the car, I'm not the house, I'm not the job, I'm not my partner, I'm not the shoes or the clothes or anything else. I am all of it. I am that I am. I am the divine. I am me, and me is enough just the way I am. And I can be my contribution in this universe without even trying, by just simply being me. I've had to let go of control and expectations and comparisons. I have some dear friends that are native, indigenous people. And there's a beautiful story that I was told once because I asked about that. How do I control? How do I fix? How do I make? And this wise elder said, no, no, no. And then he told a story. He said, when you get in the river, when you fight the current, the harder you try to swim, you sink. He said, when you relax, when you let go, when you go with the flow, the current will take you exactly where you're meant to be. And it's interesting. I've been in the water. Swimming is one of the only things I can do anymore where I move my body, but it's true. The harder you fight the water, the faster you sink. And if you just let go and relax and float, it's peaceful, it's easy, and there is order in the universe. We'll be exactly where we're meant to be. And we're divine beings, and we're here to make the world a better place and literally create peace and joy for everyone. I have no doubt we could do it. We're powerful, powerful people. Any community is very powerful when they step up and decide and choose a difference. I mean, never underestimate the power of a small group of people who are focused on change. There's thousands of examples and thousands of barriers that have been overcome where people find peace, they come together, and I think humanity's awakening and actually doing it worldwide.